There are some books that don't feel like stories. They feel like old jazz music floating through the half open window at 2 am. Golden, lonely, beautiful, and quietly tragic. The Great Gatsby is one of those books. At first glance, it looks deceptively simple. Lavish parties, expensive suits, champagne towers, mansions glowing under summer skies. But underneath all that glitter is one of the saddest stories ever written about longing. Longing for love, for status, for the past, for a version of yourself that maybe never truly existed. And the strange thing is, almost everyone who reads this book remembers a different part of it. Some remember the romance, some remember the tragedy, some remember the loneliness hiding behind luxury, and some walk away realizing that the American dream itself is being quietly dissected, page by page, like something beautiful being taken apart very carefully to see what's really inside. Tonight, let's sit down with a cup of coffee and talk about the Great Gatsby. Not just the man, the dream, the green light at the end of the talk. That image stays with you long after the last page has turned because it means something entirely different to every person who reads it. The Great Gatsby was published in 1925 by F. Scott Fitzgerald. And here is the quietly haunting irony behind it. When it first came out, it wasn't a success. Not really. Critics were lukewarm, sales were modest. Fitzgerald died in 1940, believing he was fading into irrelevance. Today, it is treated like literally royalty. One of the greatest American novels ever written, studied in schools across the world, quoted endlessly, adapted into films, plays, and cultural references. A man who wrote a novel about illusions versus reality died inside the same illusion, never knowing his work would outlive everything. There is something devastatingly poetic about that. The 1920s in America were exploding with energy. Jazz clubs, stock market wealth, endless parties, a culture drunk on ambition and optimism. It was called the Jazz Age, and Fitzgerald became one of the most perceptive chroniclers. But beneath the glamour, he saw something deeply unstable. People chasing meaning through money. People reinventing themselves entirely. People trying to outrun emptiness with noise. And that atmosphere leaks into every page of Gatsby, like the cigarette smoke trapped in velvet curtains. What makes this novel timeless is that it does not merely criticize wealth, it questions desire itself. Because sometimes the thing we want most is not actually a person or a place or a dream. Sometimes it's the feeling we once attached to them. Fitzgerald saw through the jazz age while living inside it. He understood something most people only realize too late, that a culture obsessed with appearances will eventually become hollow at the center, and we are still learning that lesson. The story is narrated by Nick Carraway, a young man who moves to Long Island during the roaring 20s. Nick is quiet, observant, the kind of person who notices details the other people deliberately choose not to see. And across the bay from his modest house lives a mysterious millionaire named J. Gatsby. Now, Gatsby is fascinating in the way that a magician is fascinating. You know something is not quite right, but you can't really put your finger on it. Neither can you look away. Nobody seems to know where he came from. Rumors follow him everywhere. Some say he was a war hero. Some say he is connected to criminals. Some think he is lying about everything. Some think he simply materialized out of ambition and desire and a particular American belief that you can become whoever you decide to be. But every weekend, Gatsby throws enormous parties at his mansion. And when I say enormous, I mean cinematic. Music drifting through gardens at midnight, champagne flowing endlessly, strangers arriving without invitations and leaving without remembering why they came, laughter echoing through the marble halls that nobody fully owns yet. People come not because they know Gatsby, they come because Gatsby has become an atmosphere, a myth, a rumor made of golden light. And somewhere in the middle of all this glitter, Nick slowly gets pulled into Gatsby's world. And then Daisy Buchanan enters the story, and everything changes. The parties at Gatsby's mansion are the loneliest scenes in the book. Hundreds of people, music, champagne, and at the center of it all, one man standing slightly apart from everything, watching the green light across the water. Irony of the life is the crowd makes the solitude more visible, not less. Because here is what you slowly realize as you read. The story was never really about parties. It was about obsession. Daisy represents something far larger to Gatsby than romance. She becomes tied to memory, to status, to hope, to the life he believed he was always meant to have. If only the world had been paying closer attention when he was young and unknown and reaching for something he couldn't name. And Fitzgerald writes this emotional tension with terrifying precision. You can feel how desperately Gatsby wants to freeze time itself, to return to perfect moment, to recreate the past exactly as he imagined it, not as it actually was, but as the years have polished it in his memory until it gleams. But reality has a cruel and reliable habit of refusing to cooperate. Around them, the world of wealth and privilege begins revealing its uglier side. Carelessness disguised as freedom, moral emptiness dressed in beautiful clothes, emotional destruction hidden beneath the perfectly polished manners. And slowly, the novel transforms from dreamy and glamorous into something almost ghostly. You begin noticing how lonely everyone actually is, even in crowded rooms, especially in crowded rooms. That's what makes Gatsby unforgettable. The tragedy in this story does not arrive like thunder, it arrives softly, like realizing the song ended several minutes ago, but nobody turns the light back on. Gatsby does not want Daisy exactly. He wants the feeling he had 5 years ago standing near her. And no person, no matter how wonderful, can give you back a feeling that belonged to a different version of yourself. And that's the tragedy. And it's not specific to Gatsby. Most of us have some version of that green light somewhere in our life. On the surface, this is a story about wealthy people in 1920s making terrible decisions. But what Fitzgerald is really doing is something much more uncomfortable. He is asking, what happens when you attach your entire sense of self-worth to something external? When the dream becomes more important than the reality you are standing in? When the performance of life replaces the actual living of it? And here is where this nearly 100-year-old novel becomes surprisingly, almost frighteningly modern. Think about it. Social media has made performance part of everyday life. Curated identities, projected success, emotional emptiness hidden behind aesthetics. The careful construction of self that looks almost complete even though everyone knows it is not. In many ways, Gatsby would fit terrifyingly well in today's modern world. A man building a glittering image while quietly collapsing underneath it. We romanticize constantly, not just relationships, entire versions of life. We tell ourselves, if I achieve this one thing, if I get to this place, if I become this version of myself, then everything will finally feel complete. And sometimes, the dream itself becomes more important than the reality. Gatsby understands that impulse not by criticizing it, but by following it all the way to its devastating conclusion. The saddest thing about the Gatsby is not that his dream fails. It's that he never questions whether the dream itself was the problem. He kept refining the approach, never the desire. And I think most of us recognize that pattern from somewhere inside our own lives. What stayed with me after reading The Great Gatsby was not the plot, it was the atmosphere. The strange emotional fog the book creates and never quietly lifts. You know that feeling when you revisit an old memory and for a second it looks beautiful, until you realize you have been quietly editing that moment in your own head for years. You remove the difficult part and you keep only the glowing things. That's Gatsby. The book holds up a mirror to that very human habit and says, look at what this cost. Look at where this leads. And it does it without ever becoming preachy, without ever lecturing. It simply shows you with extraordinary tenderness what happens when hope becomes heavier than the truth. Should you read The Great Gatsby? Well, if you enjoy the atmospheric literary fiction that leaves an emotional residue long after you have finished the final chapter, absolutely yes. If you are interested in what America's relationship with ambition and identity has always looked like, yes. And if you have ever had a green light of your own, something across the water that you have been reaching towards, then this book will feel uncomfortably close to home. Read it slowly, not as a homework, not as a classic you are supposed to admire, but as a conversation about longing and illusion and the strange stories we tell ourselves in order to keep moving forward. It is a short novel, but emotionally, it echoes far beyond the final page. The green light at the end of the dock, that image stays with you because everyone has one. And the question the book leaves you with, quietly, without ever asking it directly, is your green light leading you somewhere real? Or towards something you have been repolishing for so long, it no longer resembles what it actually was. Food for thought. And with that, me Nikhil, signing off. I will meet you again soon with another book, another quiet conversation, and another cup of coffee. Until then, take care of yourself. If you get some value from this video, please do consider subscribing to the channel. Share this video with a fellow reader and keep turning the page. I thank you very much.